The painting we are now looking at is the Tribute Money by Masaccio. This is one of the fresco paintings made by Masaccio in the Brancacci Chapel in Santa Maria del Carmine in Florence. This scene depicts a story from the New Testament. In the center, we have Christ directs St. Peter to collect the money for the tax. Our vision is leading towards Christ because his head is actually the vanishing point of this painting. Christ and apostles all pointing toward the left, which leads us to the next moment, where St. Peter takes a coin from the mouth of a fish. Then in the final moment, we have St. Peter pays the tax collector on the right side of the painting. Masaccio uses linear perspectives to paint the building in this scene, which creates a clear spatial depth, and in fact, he was one of the first to apply linear perspective and vanishing point in art. Masaccio also shows his excellent understanding of foreshortening. All the feet of the figures are standing firmly on the ground, showing how Masaccio moves away from the traditional tiptoe style and convey the mass of human bodies under gravity. We can also see the use of atmospheric perspective, where the mountains in the far back look lighter than those closer to us. Thus, so many artists later came to visit Brancacci Chapel to study from the revolutionary techniques Masaccio had brought to the Renaissance art.
Here we see the Camera Picta, or painted chamber, a fresco work located in the Ducal Palace in Mantua, northern Italy. Painted by Andrea Mantegna between 1465 and 1474, it demonstrates the incorporation of classical elements, illusionistic painting, and experimentation in alternative perspectives. This work is characteristic of Mantegna and also of antiquarianism. In this piece, heavy influence from the ancients show in the classicizing architecture, the reliefs of Roman emperors on the ceiling, and most evidently in the fact that Mantegna's figures bear an uncanny resemblance to antique sculptures. Mantegna also introduces the use of decorative festoons in this work, inspiring many appearances of this element in further Renaissance art. Mantegna uses perspective and trompe-l'oeil to create an illusionistic experience. In illusionistic art, figures and objects are rendered to blur the lines between the space of the viewer and the space of the painting. Chiaroscuro is used to imply depth in figures on an otherwise flat surface, and objects in the foreground are painted to trick the viewer into thinking they are real. As we can see, Mantegna skillfully makes it seem as if the painting is an extension of the real world. A focal point for this work is the oculus, or opening on the roof. We see Mantegna's characteristically lowered perspective, an influential style which is later also adopted by artists such as Jacopo Bellini. This particular piece has an extremely lowered perspective, which is highlighted by the foreshortening of the figures and putti above. Referred to as de sotto and su, Mantegna demonstrates the mastery of foreshortening and perspective by artists in his era. Aside from the key artistic innovations in this piece, it also highlights the shifting culture towards artists. The Camera Picta was commissioned by Lorenzo Gonzaga, Marquis of Mantua, who was a wealthy patron in Mantegna's later life. Mantegna, born into a lower class, eventually rises to wealth, fame, and a position as a court painter through his excellence in painting. This demonstrates the changing status and social ascendancy of the artists in this era.
Now, Leonardo da Vinci was a natural genius and a polymath who excelled at many different fields of study, and was revered to be one of the most diversely talented individuals ever to have lived. The Last Supper by Da Vinci was the most reproduced religious painting of all time. Leonardo da Vinci uses his intensive study of nature to display his excellence and expertise in the field of disegno. Disegno is an idea that the value of painting is tied to the original idea in the mind of the artist, which he explored and developed in his drawings before he begins painting. The Last Supper is housed by the refectory of the convent of Santa Maria del Grazi in Milan, and the placement of the painting on the wall makes it seem as if it was really there. Leonardo uses techniques such as linear perspective as well as foreshortening to achieve this effect. Leonardo da Vinci's work, as well as works by Raphael and Michelangelo, truly revolutionized art during the period of the High Renaissance. Leonardo da Vinci used a lot of his artistic expertise to further our knowledge and understanding in many fields such as biology, invention, and etc.
The Danae was created by Venetian painter Titian between 1544 and 1546. It's one of 6 versions and commissioned by Cardinal Alessandro Farnese. The scene is based on the mythological story of Princess Danae, who's locked in a tower to remain a virgin following a prophecy that her firstborn son would grow up to kill her father. Despite this warning, she's impregnated by Jupiter, here represented by the cloud and shower of gold. In accordance to the values of Venetian painting, where importance was placed on color over design, Titian creates a convincing portrayal of the sensuous female form. He softens her form where we see the canvas coming through in the areas around her torso, creating a purposeful texture and showcasing his control over the materials. Here we see bolts of lightning throughout the cloud form, representing Jupiter, the god of lightning, created using a macchia or stain technique of painting, using patches of paint and no gloss or refinement of surface texture. Further confirmation that this is in fact Venus includes the figure of Cupid, and in the similar reclining pose seen in Giorgione's Sleeping Venus. Titian's use of luminous color to create tactility and softness in the depiction of her body, as well as the effective mannerism of the work, establishes importance in the High Renaissance style.
Raphael Sanzio was the last great master of the Renaissance. He completed the trinity of Italian Renaissance masters along with Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo Buonarroti. He was brought up in the city of Urbino, and the city's courtly atmosphere would have a large impact on his future works. Around the year 1510, Pope Julius II wanted Raphael to paint 4 new rooms he had built in the Vatican. This gave him the opportunity to showcase his talent at painting, and it resulted in his most famous work, the School of Athens. It depicts the great schism between Platonic and Aristotelian philosophy, with the figures placed in perspective and resemble an almost courtly-like space. The architecture references Donato Bramante's original plan for the new St. Peter's Basilica. The 2 figures in the center of the scene are Plato and Aristotle. The elderly Plato resembles a self-portrait that Da Vinci had drawn previously. This part of the scene acts as a vanishing point for the entire painting's perspective, and the eye is drawn away from that due to the hand motions of the 2 philosophers. Heraclitus is leaning against a block of marble and bears a resemblance to Michelangelo, who is assuming a very contemplative pose. Towards the right-hand corner, you will see an elderly man giving a mathematical spectacle, which is said to represent Bramante, and to the right, you will see a self-portrait of Raphael staring out of the painting. The painting itself represents the culmination of a century of classical rediscovery. The incorporation of contemporary portraits into a classical subject matter suggests that this generation of artists have a closer connection to the artists and figures of classical antiquity, and that their world is much like the world of the ancients.